We would like to welcome you to this morning's commemoration of the International Holocaust Memorial Day on behalf of the Holocaust Memorial here on Miami Beach. As you know, the International Holocaust Memorial Day was formulated by the United Nations in 2005, based on the day that Auschwitz, the most notorious of all of the concentration and death camps, was liberated by the Red Army on January 27th, 1945. When the Soviets came into the Auschwitz concentration camp, they found only 7,000 individuals, mostly very ill, on the verge of dying, because the German SS had already moved anyone that could walk on what was called the Death March, moving them into the interior of, on their way towards Germany. And so over 1 million people were murdered at Auschwitz alone. And we know, of course, that a total of more than 6 million were murdered during the years of World War II during the Holocaust. So we appreciate very much your being here in order to commemorate this day. Just a word about the program and then we'll get started. Today's program will be based on the life of Sigi Wilzig, whose first job here in the United States was shoveling snow because he was a Holocaust survivor who he himself had survived the concentration camps. So we will see the 15-minute documentary. Those of you that are interested in receiving the tremendous curriculum that was created for the documentary, you can put that information in the chat and we'll send it to you at a later date. And we're also really very pleased to welcome the author of the book Unstoppable, which is the life of Sigi Wilzig, Joshua M. Greene. And just a word about him now, and then we'll introduce him after the film. Joshua is a renowned Holocaust author and filmmaker. He is also a popular lecturer who has spoken at the Pentagon and at the Judge Advocate General's College. His documentaries have aired both on PBS and the Discovery Channel. So welcome, Joshua, and we're looking forward to talking with you after the movie. So please sit back, and we have a 15-minute documentary to show about Sigi Wilzig, who talks about how Auschwitz never left him.
The longer I live, the more I remember. I'm trying to get away from the past, but it isn't possible. I am not liberated yet. I live in Auschwitz every day.
I was born in 26 in Krojanke. It was West Prussia, about 155 miles northeast of Berlin. 4,500 people, and I would think there were about 1,500 Jews. My mother's name was Sophie, and my father's name was Isidor. My mother was an Orthodox woman. My father made a little living. He bought hides with 2 horses and a wagon. In 1935, we left everything, and the next morning we were in Berlin. There was an immediate change when Hitler came to power. You had already the sons joining the Nazi party. Well, I was beaten up regularly. Kristallnacht, I was 12 years old. As a child, when you see synagogues burn, Jewish homes go up in flames, and the police not doing anything, it was like the end of the world. It was forced labor run by the army. It used to make lamps before the war, and I worked on a lathe. I was 14 and a half years old, and I worked 72 hours. How much more can you do? They called it evacuation. That was the word. For instance, I was picked up in the middle of the night, 2:30, 3 o'clock, from this Lampenweber, from this forced labor that I did. When the trains pulled up, I looked out of the window. I know we were going east. But going east didn't mean Auschwitz. We didn't know there was an Auschwitz. So we arrived the night of March 3rd, bitter cold. I saw flames coming out only about 150 feet away from the train. So I thought it was a brick factory. I didn't know that people would be burned and gassed. To have been born as a Jew in Germany, to get beaten, to get hard labor, all of that. But the gas chambers, no, that you didn't expect. Where 10,000 people could be gassed in one night. The smell, that is a little bit hard to describe because there is no other smell like this. Have you ever seen people being burned? Have you ever smelled them? Neither did I. You see in my arm what the Nazis did. 104, 732. The little triangle, only for Jews. The selection was really a dastardly, terrible situation. My mother was immediately murdered in the gas chamber. My father was badly beaten. My father died in front of me. The Auschwitz one was the main camp. The main camp are brick buildings, block by block. And 10 was the experimental, where the women went in and the women didn't come out. Please do not ask me what kind of experiment. I think the Germans had a word, unmenschlich, unhuman. How did I find a way to live? If you didn't find out what I found out, you would be dead. There was no other way. I looked for every opening that they could possibly use someone like me, and I overheard something about bricklayers. I became an instant bricklayer. I did it for about 6 months. They needed someone in the laundry. I never worked in the laundry in my life, but I got away with 3-4 months. How did you survive 2 years of Auschwitz? It was not my education, which I didn't have any. It was my brain, which I didn't have much. It was the hand of God. The death march began on the 17th of January. We left Auschwitz and we started to march 150, 160 miles. It was a combination of open cattle cars and walking. It was winter time. We huddled together. The first stop was Gleiwitz, a major center for coal and for metal. When the doors opened, a sight that I will never forget. We were sent to Vienna, to Melk and to Steyr. Our marching ended in Mauthausen. And when we were taken into the small shower room, we actually felt you would be gassed when you hear the clicking of the metal. That's something that stays with you forever. Somebody pointed on top of a hill a uniform I'd never seen, the American khaki uniform. They broke down the gates. That's where I was liberated. I had fever and sickness and everything else. I weighed 82 pounds. I left Europe November 29th, 47, and arrived in America December 12th, 47. What kind of work did I do first when I came to this country? Next, I was the original glue sniffer, putting glue on the back of leather bags for $28 a week. Oh, next I became an experienced leather goods salesman. My mind was made up that I can sell better than anybody else. Naomi Sisselman. We got married March 1454 in the Little Hungary on Houston Street. The whole dinner was $12.95, including the plaster flower. In 6 or 7 weeks, I went from salesman to general manager. I ran the business and doubled it. What did I do next? I acquired control of Wilshire Oil Company of Texas, a little oil company. I bought it piece by piece by piece by piece. The Rothschild in me went to the bank, the Trust Company of New Jersey, a 100-year-old institution. I was only the second Jew to become a president of a bank. The Jews were not bankers. Maybe there were a couple of savings and loans, but not of major size. Commercial banking particularly was a fiercely anti-Semitic business. They think because I'm a refugee and because I never went to school, I didn't even graduate public school, that how the hell do I become a president of a bank? I did it anyhow. I'm the president of a $4 billion bank. I was born to be president. If there's an organization that has anything to do with the Holocaust, I address their organizations, I give money, and I insist that my children go. the people that speak about it, and we're not there. They have to take the best from books, from studying, from movies, from theater. But when you were there, at a young age, then it stays with you.
When I see what I went through and hundreds of thousands of others that are not here to tell you, so I speak for them. I have that right. I have that obligation to speak for them because we're a dying breed. And too many people are telling you there was no Holocaust. Never can anyone describe the scene. If you hear it 1,000 times, the chances are you are not capable of believing it.
What kinds of nightmares do you have?
Very bad. Can't even talk about. It's something that is there. You are in Auschwitz every day. I'm going to tell you something that I don't think I ever said. As terrible as it sounds, I don't think I could live without the nightmares. It gives me the very ultra realistic difference between life and death. It shows me what life is now, particularly as a Jew, and that I didn't give it up, what I am. I wouldn't want to be anything else. If I would have to go through, God forbid, the same thing, I would go through the same thing as a Jew.
Thank you to everyone. If you came in late, in the middle of the 15-minute documentary, we will be posting it onto the Holocaust Memorial's YouTube page. Just give us a few days, or if you'd like to send me an email, we'd be happy to get a copy of today's program to you. So as you can see, Sigi Wilzig never forgot. what happened to him in Auschwitz. And it's very telling that his quote, that Auschwitz is always with him, no matter where he went, no matter what he did, no matter the success that he reached. So we're very thrilled to have with us here the author of the book Unstoppable, about Sigi's life and his thoughts, which is what the movie was created from. So Joshua, would you share with us a few thoughts, and then we will have some Q&A with you as the author.
Sure, thank you. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. Sharon asked me to hold up a copy of the book. You may remember this photo from the film. That's Sigi on board the boat that brought him to America. This was an extraordinary opportunity for me as an author and filmmaker to go inside the life of a memorable human being. Writing biography is both rewarding and it's troubling. It's rewarding because if you do a good job, your book is read and reviewed, and that's very gratifying. It's troubling because, well, you're responsible for condensing a life of a human being into something that's read in just a few hours. And biographers have to decide which parts of their subject's life to describe. In the case of Sigi Wilzig, the assignment was even more complicated because he was a Holocaust survivor. And there was no telling in advance what people reading the biography were going to know about the Holocaust. So it took place 80 years ago and thousands of miles away. So there was quite a bit of explaining needed in the book to make sure that readers understood the context of Sigi Wilzig's amazing life. He was just 7 years old, as you learned, when the Nazis came to power in Germany in 1933. He was physically small and never grew taller than 5 foot, 5.5. And as a child, he was always being bullied by Jew haters in Krojanka, the German village where he grew up. So he learned at a young age to think like a grown-up just in order to survive. And he developed what he used to call fox-like instincts, knowing what to say, when to pretend he had skills that the Nazis needed just to stay alive. And at age 16, when he was deported to Auschwitz, that was the largest of the thousands of Nazi camps where Jews and other minorities were sent to be tortured and starved and beaten and worked hard until they died. On arrival in Auschwitz, Sigi saw members of his family sent to be killed in the gas chambers and crematorium ovens, while he was sent to work outside in the freezing cold. And at one point in the research, I read that he had fallen ill with pneumonia and was near death. And that's when he put some of those fox-like instincts to work. For example, he heard guards say that they needed doctors, assistants, people to help in the prisoner hospital. So he pretended that he'd had years of experience working in hospitals and lied to get a job indoors, and it saved his life. Another time in Auschwitz, he made friends with a boy who was 6 years older than he was, named Larry. Larry worked in what were known as the Canada warehouses. These were supplies warehouses, and that was considered a very good job for a couple of reasons. One, it was indoors, so you could stay warm in winter. And two, the warehouses were the place where all of the luggage was sent. When new prisoners arrived by train in Auschwitz, all of their bags were confiscated and sent to the warehouses where prisoners removed from the bags the money, jewels, medicines, and other valuables. And if you had a job there, you might be able to steal some of that and use it to swap for food or something else that could keep you alive. For example, a bar of soap. Nobody got soap in Auschwitz, but if you could swap some of that stolen jewelry for a piece of soap, you could keep yourself clean. Why was that important? Well, because in Auschwitz, people died not just from starvation or torture. They also died from the rotting away of their own bodies, from deterioration in filth and disease. So a piece of soap could save your life. If you want to understand what it was like for someone in a concentration camp, you have to avoid judging them. This was an important realization in writing this story. We live by certain values in the normal world. If Sigi Wilzig lied about having certain job skills, for example, or took things that didn't belong to him, can we say that he was a liar or a thief? The Nazis starved their victims, and the only food they gave the Jews and others was a little piece of stale, moldy bread and maybe a cup of rotten soup. And people did what they had to do just to survive. So when we think about the Holocaust and we think about survivors of the camps, we have to suspend our usual values and remember the larger context. So Sigi spent about 2 years in Auschwitz. And then in 1945, as World War II was coming to an end, the Nazis marched the surviving prisoners out of Auschwitz to camps deeper inside Nazi Germany. These were what later became known as the death marches, because if you were too sick or you couldn't walk, the Nazi guards would shoot you in the head and just leave your body in the snow. Sigi and his friend Larry were on that death march, and Larry was nearly dead from sickness and hunger. Sigi didn't want to leave his friend to be killed by the Germans, so he bent down and let Larry climb up on his back. And Sigi continued marching, carrying Larry on his back. So the war finally ended in 1945, April, and Sigi was liberated from Camp Mauthausen. He weighed less than 90 pounds, but he was so grateful to be alive that he became obsessed with making it big in business once he came to America. And finally, he arrived here at age 21 in 1947. And even though he was an immigrant who didn't speak much English, and even though he didn't have any money, and even though he didn't have any education, and even though America was very anti-Semitic, still he managed to build this business empire worth billions of dollars in assets. How did he do that? Same way as he survived in the camps. He used his fox-like instincts to figure out solutions, even to problems he knew nothing about. He didn't have much book learning, never went to business school or learned anything about the oil and gas business. What you could say, I think, is that he developed sharp intuitions from his life experiences. Sigi died of cancer in 2003, and his family asked me to help preserve his memories by writing a book about him. It was difficult. His experiences were painful and very sad, but his life, especially after coming to America, was joyful. I interviewed about 100 people for this book, family, friends, employees in his bank and oil companies, and everybody remembered him as having a great sense of humor, always ready to help people who needed help. And to write this book, I added memories that Sigi himself had recorded on video. There was a lot of research needed. Also, for example, to be able to describe anti-Semitism in America in the 1950s, when Sigi was first starting out. And what struck me time and again was how much this little guy, who had been through so much sadness and tragedy as a kid, appreciated his life. He appreciated being an American. So much so that sometimes he would stand up in restaurants and start singing and dancing. That's how much he loved his life. And what he loved to do more than anything else in life was teach young people about the Holocaust. And if he were alive today, I think he would be very grateful to each of you that you are here learning about what happened to him and other Jews and other minorities in those tragic years, so that you can recognize the signs of hatred and bigotry and will speak up, so that the horrors he knew as a young person in the Holocaust will never happen again. So thank you for this chance to talk with you today.
Thank you so much, Joshua, for illuminating a large part of Sigi's life that we just saw in the video. If I could ask everyone to post questions in the chat, and then we would be able to ask you. If I could, while we're waiting for that, if I could ask you what do you think luck played in Sigi Wilzig's surviving Auschwitz?
That's a
What role
big
did
question.
luck play?
Yeah, very big question, because each individual has his or her own perspective on survival. Some people said it was the hand of God. As you heard Sigi say, he was a very believing Jew. Other people felt that God had abandoned them, and that it was sheer chance. There was no rhyme or reason to it. Can I tell a quick story? For his job for the American Counterintelligence Corps after the war, he took a plane ride, and Sigi described that it was a cold, rainy, cloudy day, and the plane climbed up through the cloud bank, and on the other side of the clouds, it was a beautiful, bright, sunshiny day. And he said, in that moment, my faith in God was reconfirmed, that God was speaking to me saying, don't despair. And he says, sometimes a cloud like Hitler gets between us, but I'm still here. That was his faith.
Yeah.
But he would also admit that luck played a role.
You know, it was very hard for, actually impossible for people to stand up against the mighty German army. Who among us as citizens of a country could stand up against an army that was under the command of Adolf Hitler and the Germans?
Yes.
To murder all of the Jews.
And there are many who would say that this is what happened to us when we did not have our own nation, when we did not have our own army, when we were defenseless and helpless. And for Sigi, the greatest miracle of all was the creation of the state of Israel.
So we also want to recognize on this International Holocaust Day that the Germans also were intent on murdering, when they could, the Roma, who is the correct term now. However, people might know the old term that was used to describe gypsies. Also the gay and lesbian community, handicapped. So the German machine, and especially in Auschwitz, were also a smaller group, but were also the targets of the German army. And that's important, especially on this day, to point that out. We remembered them as well. So Joshua, what do you think Sigi would say? Because obviously you know him very well from your research. What would he say to the teenagers that are on today's call? Because after all, this was over 80 years ago, and there are certainly things we take into our own society today from those days. What do you think he would say to our teens?
Good question. There are two things I think he would say. The first thing he'd say is, no matter how many troubles or problems or sadnesses you have in your life, don't give in to despair. He says, if I'm able to go through what I went through and love my life, you should also appreciate the blessing of life. So never give in to despair. And if you lift your head up from the ground and look for those opportunities, you will find ways out of the darkness. You will find solutions to problems that may seem absolutely unsolvable right now. The second thing I think he would say is, learn about the Holocaust and never stop learning about the Holocaust. And don't think that this doesn't concern you because maybe you're not Jewish. Well, I'm Hispanic, or I'm Black, or I'm this, or I'm that, I'm Asian. He says, today they came for the Jews, tomorrow they would come for someone else, Sharon, as you rightly mentioned just now. And he wanted young people in particular to be able to recognize the signs of bigotry, racism, hatred, so that they would learn to speak up. It may be scary, but it's necessary. And he was looking to enlist students as his deputies in Holocaust remembrance.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing so much about Sigi's life and his philosophy, which is really of great help for us as we move ahead in our society. We want to encourage everyone to visit us here at the Holocaust Memorial Miami Beach. And the memorial is open to all guests. If you are in a class, we have private tours that your teacher can register through our website. And I would like to remind everyone that today at 1 o'clock, we are getting a private tour of MoCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art, with their exhibit, I Am Marianne. The artist Marianne, a Holocaust survivor, who created modern art. And their exhibit is very fascinating, and you can still sign up for that particular program and tour that, again, is at 1 o'clock on Zoom. So thank you to everyone. Those of you that are interested in receiving the curriculum, which can be used with the video or as a standalone in terms of Holocaust education, you can contact me, shorowitz@gmjf.org, or post it in the chat and it'll get to me. Thank you very much, everyone.